Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and coming to Latter-day Saints for Life. I am so flattered to be here with y'all. I'm a little intimidated because you guys I very much respect Latter-day Saints for Life and the courage that you guys have. It's not very cool what you guys do. You're not, did you know you're not cool? And
Well,
and
most
the,
of us have gathered, yeah.
Yeah, and the media doesn't think you're very cool, and you guys do it anyways. And so I'm very flattered to be here, and I hope I don't screw it up. Right now, my sweet little daughter brought home the flu for everyone in my family, and we are all dying from the flu. So I'm a little bit under the weather. So if I sound like I've got a deeper, sexier voice, it's not true, actually. It's just the flu talking. So I've got some Afrin. This episode is brought to you by Afrin. Let's see if I can share my screen here. Sure, share my entire screen. All right, can everybody see this? I'm hoping I'm getting a nod. All right. So, I am not a political activist. I'm quite apolitical. But one cause I do very much believe in is the cause of life. I think the cause of life is actually the whole reason everything exists. I think that God moves through the universe organizing dead things into live things. Life is our cause. Life is our team. And I'm an author. I wrote a book called The Lost Gems of Genesis. And I wasn't planning on writing a book about abortion, actually. But I look at ancient apocryphal documents, newly discovered ancient texts, and I read those a lot. And there are sometimes very powerful common threads that come through. And one of those that came through was abortion and the cause of life in the ancient stories. And so I weaved them together, wrote this book. I think some of you read it and said, Jonah's got a lot to say about abortion. And you guys...
That's exactly what happened, yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me just tell you a little bit about what I've kind of found as a scriptorian. I think you're probably far better versed at what to do now and things like that. But let's just set up kind of what I found. Before I wrote Lost Gems of Genesis, I wrote this book, The Key to the Keystone. And in it, I made a very controversial claim. I claimed that the Old Testament had been altered and that some scribes were not fans of the Messiah. And that's why the Old Testament doesn't really talk about the Messiah very much. It's a little hint of a whisper of a clue or a proverb or a metaphor. But then the Book of Mormon comes on the scene, and it's just the Messiah is all over the place. And it talks about Jesus Christ all the time. It talks about him very specifically and very boldly, where he'll be baptized, the year he's going to come, what his name will be, the name of his mother, for pity's sakes. It's very specific. And those things are not found in the Old Testament. And that's because the Old Testament, I believe, was very deliberately altered and redacted by scribes who did not want the Messiah to compete with their worship of the law. Lawyers love law. And so the lawyers said, let's get rid of this Messiah guy. He's competing with us. Anyways, so Lost Gems of Genesis, I'm trying to piece back together what Genesis should have been. What might have been in Genesis before it was all messed up by scheming scribes. The story, much of it will be familiar to you. Okay, so if we go to Genesis chapter 3, and I suppose everybody can kind of see my screen here. In Genesis chapter 3, actually, even before that, the first commandment that Adam and Eve are given is to multiply and replenish the earth. Right? We're all familiar with that. Then right after Adam and Eve are kicked out of the garden, or rather as they're being kicked out of the garden, God does not curse man. He does not curse woman. He curses the serpent. The language is not incidental. And when he curses the serpent, he says, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. On the belly shalt thou go, and dust thou shalt eat all the days of thy life. I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. And then it talks about childbirth with Eve. Now, we know from 2 Nephi chapter 2 that the fall was somewhat necessary or tied to replenishing the earth. Lehi says they would not have had children had they not fallen. 2 Nephi chapter 2:25, Adam fell that men might be, men are that they might have joy. And then he goes on to say they would not have had children. So the last thing that the serpent hears before he exits the garden is that the seed of the woman is going to crush thy head. And Satan is no fool. And he knows that this is the threat to his winning the war. So there is a thread of ancient documents that follow this story. And they just happen to correspond with what Joseph Smith claims in his restoration of the Book of Enoch. So Joseph Smith, right after the Book of Mormon, receives the revelation concerning Adam, which is chapters 5, 6, and 7 of the Book of Moses. And he receives it with no notes, no nothing. He doesn't say what it is. It just comes to him just like the Book of Mormon did. It just, boom, falls into his brain. And in it, there are some very interesting little gems that he leaves behind. It hints a lot at fertility. Okay, when we teach creation, sorry if I'm a bit scattered here. When we teach creation, please do not turn to Genesis chapter 1 or chapter 2 anymore. Can we be done with this? Okay, let's not go to chapter 1, chapter 2, or chapter 2. Go to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is what we should start with, okay? This is the book of the generations of Adam in the day that God created man. In the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. Okay? And Adam lived 130 years and begat his son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. So, what Genesis chapter 5, which probably comes from the priestly document, does is it says not only was Adam created in the image of God, but so was Seth. So was Eve. Okay? Women are also created in the image of God. And we're all created in the image of God. We are not created from dust. We're created in the image of God. And that's what chapter 5 communicates to us, that we are the children of God. We have his image. And that's a very important thing to remember. So chapter 5, guys, we missed chapter 5. There is a wonderful apocryphal story that comes from the Greek apocalypse of Moses, as well as the Armenian penitence of our forefather Adam. And in those apocryphal documents, it tells the story of Adam when he finally is dying, and he sends Eve and Seth back to paradise to petition for some oil, olive oil. It's in the book, you can read it. And as they're going back, they meet a beast, and the beast attacks them, some kind of a beast, who knows what it was. I think it was a yippy little dog, like a little poofy, like yippy dog. And it accosts Seth and Eve, and they get in the spat, and Seth scolds the animal and says, "Don't you understand that this woman is in the image of God?" And rebukes the beast. Now, I love that, because you hear that Adam is in the image of God, but you don't always hear that Eve is also in the image of God. I love that Seth defends his mother and says, "Hey, she's made in the image of God. Back off." And I thought that was a great moment when a boy defends his mom and sees her for the glorious divine image that she is. Eve is much maligned in the ancient in the traditional canon. Eve is blamed for a lot of things because scribes were usually incels, and they believed in celibacy. And they locked themselves in their towers, and they scribbled on their papyri all day long. And they didn't like that farmer guy right there, who has a wife and children and is getting crops out of his soil, that guy is closer to God than they are. That guy doesn't read. He doesn't know ancient Hebrew. Who ever heard of such a thing? I sit all day and I read these texts. I'm godly. They didn't like that. The Levites had families. They had they raised families. They had wives and children and stuff. And that bugged the scribes. They thought, no. Godliness means just like poring over texts all day, and that's all you do. And education is equal to godliness. Joseph Smith rejected this idea very much. And Joseph Smith said, no, godliness is fatherhood and motherhood. You want to be godly? Go chop some wood. Go fix a leaky faucet. Go fold some laundry. That's what godliness is. And Joseph Smith was very adamant about that. And Joseph Smith believed in exalting the everyman and the mundane. It's quite controversial. So Eve and family and sex and love and children were kind of stripped out of the traditional text. So I love Genesis chapter 5. It reminds us that we're in the image of God. Also, Genesis chapter 15. Let's see if I can switch the page here. Here we go. Genesis chapter 15 is the promise of fertility given to Abram. if you remember where this comes from. He says, look toward heaven, tell the stars, if thou can number them, he said unto them, so shall thy seed be. Noah is given a similar promise. Abraham is given that promise. That promise is passed to Isaac. That promise is passed to Jacob and passed to Joseph. Genesis, the most important book of the Bible, could be summed up as this family chasing the promise of fertility, of having children. But before we get to Noah, there was the period of the antediluvians. So if you remember this is Genesis chapter 6, a very strange chapter. Verse 4, it talks about there were giants in the earth in those days. So I go to unpack this verse in my book. I say there's actually a lot written about this period in these other books of Enoch that we've discovered. There's 5 books of Enoch that we've now discovered. That's a lot. That's kind of crazy, right? Most people only know about 1 or 2. There's actually 5. And I try to triangulate them in my book to say that there's a story that they tell. And the story, and I'm just going to bring up my book here for you guys. In this chapter called Seed of the Woman, rated R, because it deals with some of the stuff that we're going to talk about here. God says, the end of all flesh has come before me. And what happens is you have the strange tale of the sons of Seth coming down the mountain, and they mix with the daughters of Cain. And what they do is they commit adultery, and they betray their covenants, and they betray their family, and they fall into debauchery. And they bring some kind of knowledge. This is attested to in many documents. This isn't just a fairy tale I saw in a YouTube video. This is attested to, and I cite everything, but the ancient documents all attest to them bringing some kind of a technology with them, some kind of a knowledge. They call it roots, or the cutting of roots, or a potion, or a draft that they make their wives drink, their girlfriends drink. And what it does is it renders the women sterile so that they can have as much fun as they want without those pesky children being born. Now, Satan is behind all of this. Eventually, it spreads and spreads until it says in some of these documents that there's a risk that mankind will go extinct, that there won't be anybody left. He says, here's some attestations. Book of Jasher, chapter 2:19. For in those days the sons of men began to trespass against God and to transgress the commandments which he had commanded to Adam to be fruitful and multiply in the earth. So this is before the flood. This is why there's a flood. This is building up to why there's a flood. And it's saying the commandment that they were breaking was having children. That's the commandment they were breaking. Jasher goes on to say, they caused their wives to drink a draught that would render them barren, in order that they might retain their figures, not my translation, retain their figures, and whereby their beautiful appearance might not fade. The sons of men caused some of their wives to drink. They caused them to drink. This eventually gets very much out of hand. They go from, this is some spooky stuff, they go from giving it to their girlfriends to giving it to all women so that they can force themselves on any women that they want. They become sex slavers. It spreads throughout the earth. Women help them, and it isn't just the men. It becomes a big thing. In 1 Enoch chapter 98, verse 5, it tells us about a little bit about the justification for what God was deciding to do. Man of himself has created this thing, this sterilization. And under a great curse shall they fall who commit it. And barrenness has not been given to the woman, but on account of the deeds of her own hands. She dies without children. So the Lord is saying, look, I didn't make you barren. You guys are messing with things you should not have messed with. There's records about, and some of these might be symbolic or metaphorical, but they talk about the sons of men going to the edge of the abyss, the ocean, casting their newborn infants into the ocean because they don't want them. The justification they give is that we shall seize this earth for ourselves. We don't want any children being born to us because we want to keep the earth all for ourselves. We want our women to stay beautiful. We want to have as much fun as we want. We don't want the responsibility of these children. Eventually it turns a little bit dark. There's even some records that talk about some real dark stuff. They might have been, cannibalizing. It gets kind of crazy. I'm just reading the texts. Eventually there was some fascinating passages that I found about, and by the way, they were not doing this innocently. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that these were souls that they were killing and they were cutting off. And they would laugh. There's even a hymn, I think it's in First Enoch, that they sing as a joke. They laugh and they say, we the righteous will see our days. Or we the wicked will see our days. But these righteous people will never see one day. They will be aborted. Now, in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, where it says there were giants in the earth in those days, actually, that word does not exist in the Hebrew. Nephilah, the Nephilah that we translate as giants, actually does not mean big, hulking, guys who live at the top of beanstalks. That's not what Nephilim means. Nephilim is a poetic word. It has kind of a tripartite meaning. It can bounce between mighty men or fallen is one translation, and then also abortions, quite literally abortions. This is not my translation, I swear. But Hebraists have known for a long time that this is one of the possible meanings of the word Nephilim, and they can't figure out why. But if you piece these records together, it says, well, because that's what they were doing, because they were spreading abortion and sterilization throughout the world. Now, Joseph Smith brings the key to all of this and restores the plan of salvation, which is that fertility that God talks about in Genesis chapter 3, and 1, 3, 5, 15, that follows Noah and Abraham and Enoch and Abraham, Isaac, Joseph, all the way down. This promise of fertility was the point. It was the point, and Joseph restores that with the plan of salvation. So with that in mind, when we read 3rd Enoch, this is the Hebrew Enoch, chapter 44, verse 8, this is an interesting little hint. The Lord is thinking out loud here. He says, since these wicked, talking about the antediluvians aborting all their children, since they do this sin, this so-and-so, and transgress with such and such, itak, how could I deliver my great right hand in the downfall by their hands? What the Lord is saying is, I have to get Jesus Christ to earth. I have to get the Savior to be born. The serpent, Satan knew that the seed of the woman was the only way that God was going to make this whole plan work. He thought, if I can choke off births, then I can prevent the advent of the Messiah. So my conclusion is, God did not flood the earth because of wickedness. It never was wickedness. That was never it. It was because if the Messiah could not have been born, then it doesn't matter if there's wickedness or righteousness. Everyone is screwed. Without Jesus Christ coming and atoning for us, we're dead forever. And choking off birth was Satan's plan to prevent the advent of the Messiah. Now, Joseph hints at this in Moses chapter 6, I believe. It talks about Enoch having children. Now, there's a slight difference. In the Genesis account, it says Enoch had lots of children. In the Joseph account, it does not say that. It says he had only one child. Enoch was a miraculous birth. So was Methuselah. So was Noah. In the Noahic Apocryphon, in the Book of the Giants, and the Genesis Apocryphon, some of these texts, they talk about how Noah was a miraculous birth because people were so sterile. The human race had almost killed itself off. And so God had to help these births, barely make it through so that he could preserve a righteous line to eventually get the Messiah to come. That's the vision that Enoch sees in chapter 7 of the book of Moses, is that he says, when will the earth rest? Will you promise after this flood that you'll save us? And God says, I will preserve one line. I'll preserve Noah, and eventually the Savior will be born from him. I won't leave you all. And so the great plot of the antediluvians, and the reason that God flooded the earth, was Satan was trying to choke off the advent of the Messiah. If I can stop Christ from being born, then I win by default. And it actually is a pretty brilliant plan, and it almost worked. In the Mandaean book of Enoch, which is a very lesser known one, Satan is celebrating. He says, who is greater than I, more noble, more excellent, more powerful? Who can overcome me? Who can surpass me in strength? It's strange. He turns to the camera and he does this kind of celebration, who will oppose me type of speech. Very interesting for anybody who's been through the Temple Endowment ceremony. No, he is not my equal. Who indeed would be more powerful than I? Who dares to molest or make afraid? He says, let him come. As the Mandaean text records, the devils revel let us seize Adam and all his family. So he says, this is our plan. We're going to cut it off and it'll all come crumbling down. And it was very close to working. But God preserved Noah to try to reset things. So I hope that makes sense. That's the picture that I try to paint by triangulating these sources together. I have over 1,600 different citations in the book. So I'm not making this up. Everything triangulates around this idea. Now we have the idea that there were giants and there were monsters and God flooded the earth because they were wicked, which I would argue doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. The word giants does not appear in Genesis chapter 6. It simply is not there in the original languages. The word is abortion. Now that word in Greek is used by Paul, and it also appears again in Job in the Septuagint, where Paul says, I am like a child who never saw the light. Remember this? He says, I'm like a child, ektromoi, I believe is the word. Let's see if I can find it. Ektrom. Here we are. In Greek, the word that's used there in that Genesis chapter 6 for Nephilim that everybody thinks is giants, it's actually abortion. That word in Greek is ektroma, and it means an abortive birth. It's used only 3 times in the Septuagint Old Testament, and every time it refers to a baby who dies. Now, Paul uses it to describe himself because he says, I am like a child who never saw light, because Jesus Christ came and went, and I didn't see him. I didn't see the light. And so he compares himself to an ektroma, to a child. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 8, I think. So it is abortion. I'm not making this up. You can Google this. The word is abortion. Now this occurs right before the flood. You piece these together, and I think the conclusion, I think there's a very good argument that the reason God flooded the earth and killed nearly all of mankind is because they had sterilized themselves and aborted their children to the point where the end of all flesh was before him. He doesn't mean he was causing the end of all flesh, but that he was witnessing the end of all flesh. And he said, my plan is thwarted. I've got to reset. And so he preserved righteous Noah, who would then be able to have children. And that promise of fertility continues. So what does this mean for us today? I had a few things that I wanted to share. Let's see. What do we do now? Look, of all the people on this call, I'm probably the least qualified to tell us what we should do about abortion. I'm very apolitical. I'm just a scriptorian. That's all I really am. But there's a couple interesting things that come out of this, okay? Fertility was the point. It was like the whole reason. If you were an alien coming down, if you asked AI to just read Genesis and tell us, why are we here? It might say, to have babies. That's like the whole point. That's what God says, have babies and maybe do some gardening, perhaps. Have a lot of babies, right? We need to restore fertility to its rightful place as the highest glory. The reason that we might not do this is because we're sensitive to people who have fertility issues. Fertility is a real issue. I had a brother who struggled with this. I have a very close loved one who struggles with this. It's a real sad thing. But the reason that it's sad is because it's so godly. The reason we're heartbroken for infertility is because fertility is so glorious, right? It doesn't make sense to be so careful and sensitive about people who can't have children or don't have children if we're not equally as enthusiastic when people do have children. That's hypocritical. We need to maintain that balance. We need to say, we're very sad that you can't have children because having children is flippin' awesome. Pardon my French. I'm sorry about my French. Until that's French. So because of our sensitivity to people who might suffer from fertility issues, to which I'm very sensitive, the word motherhood doesn't even appear in the young women's theme. Being a father appears in the young men's theme, but we're so scared, perhaps, I don't want to impugn anyone's motives, perhaps because we're so sensitive to offending people who might have fertility struggles or women who might not be able to be mothers. Not everybody can just choose to be mother. because of that, perhaps we've taken motherhood out of the young women's theme. I think that's a mistake. I think that motherhood should be up there. And marriage, I mean, not everybody can choose to be married. That doesn't mean we take it out. That doesn't mean we say that marriage is worthless. I mean, not everybody gets a chance to be baptized, for pity's sakes. But we don't say, well, baptism isn't that important. Au contraire, we go the world over indexing people so that we can baptize after they're dead, for pity's sakes. So simply because it isn't available to everybody doesn't diminish the importance and the paramount place that fertility and family should have in the gospel. Beware. The antediluvians have a message for you. Women, the most beautiful woman is the mom bod. Okay? Bring back the mom bod. All right? All these supermodels prance around trying to look all sexy in their lingerie. Sorry, not sexy. Sexy is mom bod. Okay? This used to be a thing where you'd have children, you'd have it, and you'd care for them. A mother is more beautiful and glorious than any other, what? Than prancing down a catwalk. Make mom bod great again. We need to make hats. The antediluvians wanted to retain their figures, it says. They were very sensitive, and they knew that having children can kind of blow up your body. And women know this. It can kind of blow up your body. And I don't want to remind everybody, but actually, God knows that too. Yeah, he knew that. He's not shocked by that. He's not like, wait, what? Oh my gosh, really? Well, then I take it all back. God knows about this. We need to, motherhood is a sacrifice. It is a sacrifice, and it should be sacrifice. That's not a bug, it's a feature. Sometimes we do a disservice when we succumb to therapeutic deism. You know what therapeutic deism is? Therapeutic deism is the philosophy that God is here to make me happy. And so the ultimate virtue is happiness. And so if something doesn't make me happy, then it must be ungodly, it must be evil. And you hear this a lot. People talk about their mental health, or they talk about their, I need to take me time, I'm in a better place, and things like that. Sometimes we succumb to this, and we play to this, and we should not. The gospel is not here to make us happy now. It's here to make us happy ultimately, but not to make us happy now. Our ancestors who crossed the plains watched their children leave bloody footprints in the snow. This wasn't making them happy. This was a horrible, horrible trial. But they pushed through it because ultimately it would give them joy and salvation in life to come. So sometimes we short circuit that and we say, do what's good for you. Go find yourself. It's all about being happy. And God wouldn't ask you to do anything, uncomfortable. He wouldn't ask you to do anything hard. And I think that is so contrary to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was constantly asking people to do hard things, horrible things. And he wasn't apologetic about it. Having children is no different. Does children make you happier? I would contend that most of the time, yeah, absolutely it does. It gives you way more fulfillment in life. But not necessarily. Our ancestors were dying on their birth beds to give children, not because they thought it'd make them happy, but because they thought, this is what I do. I'm a parent. I'm a woman. I'm a mother. This is my purpose here on earth. And we've lost so much of that. And as members of the church, we should be very careful. Don't let therapeutic deism in. Don't tell women that you have babies because it'll just make you happier. Yeah, maybe. Probably. But that's not the reason. The reason is that they're created in the image of God and you are a vessel of creation. And there's more important things than our happiness just right here and now. So beware of therapeutic deism. Don't let it suck you in. I sometimes say this and people will get angry. God does not have a plan for you. God has a plan, and you should get on board. He doesn't have 8 billion plans. He has one plan, and that plan is for everybody to be a co-creator with him. Now, that doesn't mean everybody needs to be a parent. It doesn't mean that if you're not a parent or you struggle with fertility, that you're a waste or a failure. No, that's not what it means. You can be a co-creator and not have children. You can still do that. God bless the millions of primary teachers out there who don't have children, who still help my children learn the truth about their Savior and about their purpose here on earth. That's wonderful. And they're doing so much to be co-creators with God. But that's God's plan, is to be a co-creator. It's not to go find yourself and travel and take pictures of your food on cruises. That's not God's plan for you. So I think we need to be unapologetic. Having babies can be hard. Sorry, not sorry. Having babies early can be hard. Sorry, not sorry. Being a mom is a huge sacrifice. Sorry, not sorry. You're going to spend 15 years talking baby talk to some little toddlers who don't appreciate you, and you're going to be picking up Cheerios and changing diapers, and that's going to suck for like 15 years. Yes, it is. That's true. And that's horrible. Yes. It's also wonderful and glorious. So we need to be careful. It's not a walk in the park, and we shouldn't pretend like it is. But we should be unapologetic that it is God's plan for all of us. I think our young women are in deep trouble. I think we need to tell them. When I go to talk to the young men, I'm in the young men's presidency. When I go talk to the young men, I say, what are the 3 things God wants you to be? He wants you to be a diligent missionary, a loving husband, a loyal husband, and a loving father. It says that in the young men's theme. It does not say that in the young women's theme. I think that's a real problem. So any young women's leaders out there, or if you know any young women's leaders out there, motherhood should be mentioned in every single lesson that you give. Tell our young women that is the coolest thing you can ever do. You want adventure? There is no adventure like having a child, like seeing yourself, your image in another human being. Tell them this, because if they're not going to get it from us, they're not going to get it from anyone anywhere else. We should be so annoyingly enthusiastic about parenthood and motherhood and fatherhood. It isn't just women. I sound like I'm picking on women. It's men too. It's boys too. They need to hear this. So that's kind of all I have for my presentation. I hope I didn't offend too many people. I do that all the time, and I'm not trying to offend people. But you're Latter-day Saints for life. You offend people all the time, all the time, I guess. But if there's any questions or anything, I'm not an expert on all the things you are, but I do know my apocryphal documents pretty well. And should we open it up for Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. Q&A, guys, you drop them in, I'll read them out. By the way, Jonah, I need to like come listen to this recording and let you be my parenting pep talk when I'm, changing diapers and sweeping the floor for about the 7th time, and also tripping over all the pots and pans my baby got out all over the floor, and just, acknowledge, yeah, this is hard. This isn't totally fun. It's not what I want to be doing with my time, but remembering always that there's purpose in this. And I totally agree that especially our women aren't getting this message very often, including at church and sometimes in their families too.
See, men do sacrifice to be fathers, but it's different. Men have a work life. They have a, go play pool with the guys life, or watch football with the guys life. They have the scout on the weekend life. They have their calling on Wednesday evenings or Sunday life, and they have their family life. They have kind of more lives to switch from. And that switching of gears can really help you kind of psychologically. Women of mothers of young babies, it's a slog. It's like baby time, 25 hours a day.
You don't even get your sleep time.
Yeah.
You don't clock out ever. Yeah.
It's a huge sacrifice. And it's like that, like concentrated for like 15 years. It's just this, Now at the end of that, then you get to see your beautiful children become, to grow up, and there's nothing even comes close to compare, not in the universe, of the glory and the fulfillment you'll feel looking at your children and your grandchildren. The most beautiful women in the world that just glow are those grandmas who look down at their grandbabies. They remember their birthdays. That is peak godliness in the flesh. And that's something that you will get to eventually, but for 15 years, it's a slog.
I appreciate the realism. Okay, yes, there will be a recording. Like I said, we're intending on putting up at least the majority of this up online that you will be able to access and share later. Tasha asks, how do you tackle teaching the sanctity of life in your family?
In my family, so First, say it. Say it. Stop being so, we're so shy about saying it. Tell your kids, say, when you're a father, when you're a mommy someday, I make it a point to tell my kids, like, oh, by that time you'll have 4 children and I'll be an old man. And I like saying this to my kids so they get it in their head, like, this is what dad hopes I'll be someday. And whether or not that turns out, fine. But they should know that that's the hope that you have. If we can't say it, geez, guys, then nobody can say it. Your children should know very much, and you should tell them directly, say, I hope someday you have 10 babies and you're going to love them. Why not? Say that as they're going to sleep. Beware of the Disney Plus therapeutic deism. Life is about discovering yourself. Elsa's a hero. Elsa is the worst hero ever. Elsa's horrible. Why do we worship Elsa? She literally is a supervillain. She's literally a supervillain.
No.
Hate Elsa. Horrible. Moana, way better. Moana, no Elsa. But we kind of exalt these examples of women, going off and discovering themselves and breaking free of these obligations of family and sacrifice. And it's like, well, okay, this is not very Christian, but whatever.
Yeah. Katie asks, can you talk a little bit about the jealous God section of your book? I haven't read it, so I don't know if that relates to the topic at hand or if that's...
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Pop off.
Sure. These questions are a lot easier than I thought. Whoo. I thought I was going to get some toughies here. Yes, the jealous God section. So, in the Old Testament, God is depicted as being jealous, and atheists take big issue with this. They say, "Oh, he's jealous. Oh, what a horrible God." Now, actually, there's only one time that God is called jealous, and that's in Exodus 20 when it says, "For I am a jealous God, have no other gods before me." Now, the word that's used there in the Hebrew actually doesn't mean, so in Webster's dictionary, jealous means that you wish you had what someone had, or you wish you're better than somebody, or someone else's benefit hurts you and you're jealous. Like, we know what jealous means. That is not what the Hebrew word means. The Hebrew word jealous actually comes from the root red. It means to turn red, to blush. Okay? Now, when it says that in the Old Testament, it says, oh, God was jealous of idols. What I do in my book is I try to lay out the case that there's a reason why God hates idols so much. And it is not because he feels competition with them. It's because idols were closely associated with human sacrifice. Now, the Book of Mormon actually pieces this together. If you notice, when King Noah is doing horrible things, he corrupts the priests, he corrupts the temple, he takes a bunch of wives and concubines, he's doing all these heinous things. God doesn't pick up the red Abinadi phone. It's when the Nephites, the Noah Nephites, the Xenophites or whatever, when they start human sacrifice of their captured Lamanite enemies, that's when God calls Abinadi. And that's the only time in the Book of Mormon that it describes God as jealous. So jealous is not, I'm jealous of these idols. Jealous is, I'm a father and you're killing my children. And he's Heavenly Father, but he's also a father. He's a Papa Bear. And so when his children are being sacrificed, he gets real angry. And that's where the word red in the Hebrew. I explained it in my book a lot better than I'm doing right now. But that's the only time that you see God get really red and angry. And they use the word jealous, is human sacrifice, which coincidentally is what Latter-day Saints for Life is all about. So
yeah. So I don't know if anyone's asked this, but I wanted to ask, do you feel like abortion today, does it have anything to do with the destruction that we have, that has been foretold to come before the coming of Christ? Or is that just inherent and they're not necessarily related?
So that's a good question. So, counter question. Could you go down the path that we're going without a cataclysm? Peak population is a massive catastrophe heading our way. All our systems are built on growth. And the moment that growth starts to retard, we're in for some pain. There is no pain like a fertility crisis. Like it's brutal. Empty Planet, excellent book about what happens when fertility peaks, We're heading there. Estimates show that it is not nearly as far away as we thought. My children will probably see the most crowded earth in history in their lifetime. It's coming. And when that hits and all the growth models break down, it will be permanent recession. And that will bring civil unrest. It'll be all kinds of pain. And so I guess a counter question to your question is maybe the fertility crisis is the cataclysm. Maybe that's the seed from which all the woes come. In Revelation, it talks about all these horrible curses befalling on mankind. Well, maybe it's self-inflicted because we put ourselves above replenishing the earth. And the moment you do that, economists say this, the secular scholars say this. They say, you stop having children and societies suffer horde. It's a bad path to go down. So maybe that is the cataclysm that we're going to face.
Yeah. We have a question from Andrew. Jonah, what can we do to increase church member support for the pro-life cause? Often when it comes to missionary work, people have said you can't convert beyond your own conversion, but many don't connect the same principle to defending the unborn. How can we expect the world to care about the unborn that are under attack when most in the church are indifferent or apathetic?
There you go. That's the hard question I was waiting for. Dang it, Andrew. No, that's a great question. Like with preaching the gospel, you can't convert someone. You can bring someone to conversion. You can't make a horse. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I think it begins with exalting family culture again. Make families the center of it again. Be unapologetic. Stop self-censoring because somebody struggles with fertility. Go to that person in private. Tell them you love them and have compassion on them. And make sure they know that you're not trying to offend them. But don't self-censor, especially in front of our youth. Life is the plan of God. The 2 Nephi chapter 2, Lehi says there's two things in the whole universe. There's things that act and things that are acted upon. Things that act, that's life. Life is that's the whole purpose. That's creation, is life. And we should be unapologetic about it. Try not to be offensive. People get really offended. It's really hard because people just get offended. How can we expect the world to care about the unborn? I worry that a lot of the world is just never going to care. They're just real selfish. I think the youth are where we have the most opportunity.
Well, and also the most responsibility, right?
I don't think, you know what? As
they're coming up on their fertility, I mean.
Oh, sure. Oh, no, you're totally right.
And their life, length of their life.
Yeah, I don't think members of the church are so indifferent or apathetic. I think they're afraid. I don't think they're apathetic at all. I think they're scared. I think they're scared of offending. They don't want to offend somebody. They don't want to be controversial. And so I think that's why they self-censor. And so be the change you want to see in the world. And try not to offend people, but look, every time God gives us some great, glorious truth, our first reaction is, how can I package this in bubble wrap so it doesn't offend anybody? That should not be our knee-jerk reaction. God said replenish the earth. Is that going to be hard? Yeah, sorry, not sorry. He still said it. Is that going to make me fat? Am I going to lose my bikini body? Yeah, you're gonna. Sorry, that's life. That's just going to happen. Am I going to be lonely in a cubicle for the rest of my life working to pay for these kids' mortgage and tuitions? Maybe you will. Look, having kids is the funnest crap ever. Okay, look, it is the greatest, funnest thing in the whole world. I can't imagine anything coming close. But I worry if we played the therapeutic deism game, we lose. I think it's important to remind people that it's a commandment too. It's not just a good time. But yep. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, love it. Kind of an interesting question. I've wondered if the infertility some of us are experiencing is because there are less spirits needing to come down and receive bodies. What's your knee-jerk reaction to that, Jonah?
I feel like that's something God might have said. I feel like that'd be hard for God to be like, multiply and replenish, but then nobody can. I feel like it'd be kind of tough. I feel like the infertility crisis is brought on by several things. and this bears out in the data, when people prosper economically, they have fewer babies. When they get higher education, they have fewer babies. And when they have access to contraception, pill book, pocketbook, and textbook. Those are the three different types of infertility that plague us. Now, the restored gospel resists all three of those to a remarkable degree. Monetary incentives barely make a difference. Really, the only instance of fertility really turning around was in Romania when Ceausescu made abortion illegal. And then fertility bounced back for a moment. It backfired horribly, but for a moment it did. So all these things that governments are trying are not going to work. China, you want your nation back? You want your dreams back? Let in the Mormon missionaries. We can help you with that. We'll get people having babies. So I don't think that it's, well, that would be speculation, but maybe that's why. I don't know.
Yeah. Last question here. Tasha says tips for tackling kids, abortion, etc. when dating, like how to get a real idea of what they believe, since, like you said, no one wants to talk about it.
Wow. Jeez, are there women?
I have my first initial response. Go comment on our recent post on Instagram. I said comment date if you want to connect with a single pro-life Latter-day Saint in the comment section. So go ahead and do that on Instagram. But that's probably not the most foolproof dating strategy long term. Jonah, did you have any thoughts now after?
I guess this is a little bit sad. It sounds like it isn't as natural in the church to be pro-life as maybe I thought, as maybe I assumed. I kind of assumed, like, who's the LDS woman out dating who's pro-abortion? Good heavens above.
Yeah, Jonah, we'll have to talk later. But most of the people here probably experienced some pushback in their ward or in their families, being ostracized from their fellow Latter-day Saint community for being pro-life. We're not just unpopular for the world. We're very unpopular among Latter-day Saints, and it's rough, but it shouldn't be. This should be a no-brainer. As you and I know, we should be the most pro-life, pro-natalist, most having babiesist, most protecting babiesist people out there.
That's the whole game. That's the whole game. That's what God organized life from chaos. It was replenish the earth. He put his image into us. Adam and Eve, by the way, you know what the Bible calls Adam and Eve? Calls them Adam and Eve. You know what the Book of Mormon calls Adam and Eve? Our first parents. That's very, 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 very different. These aren't just two people who bumped into each other in the garden one day. It was always meant to be babies. That was always the point. And the Book of Mormon knows this. The Book of Mormon calls them our first parents. Parents is an act. That's something you do. That's not just, I happen to be here in a garden. Let's have babies. No. It was always meant to be replenishment and fertility. You guys you're already brave, and you're already saying things that people get offended at, and that's what you should be doing. What a pity there aren't more academics on our side. I suppose academics are defined by their cowardice, so that would make sense, I suppose. I'm sorry if people are pushing back, but it's a great way to filter out the bad women.
Yeah,
huh?
And men, both ways. So
and men.
Yeah. For anyone out there dating, for sure, ask. And I've seen the more you talk about it yourself, the more you're engaged in pro-life stuff, it's going to come up.
Here's what you do. Sit behind the cute baby in sacrament meeting. Sit behind the cute baby in sacrament meeting.
And does your date...
Does your date make faces at him? Does your date go, ooh, and make faces at the cute little baby? That's a good test. If they do, all right, you're in.
Yeah. All right, Jonah, any last words before we close?
I just want to bear my testimony about a couple things. I'm not an expert on the abortion issue, but I feel like I really do know that Joseph Smith was a true prophet of God. He was called by God to restore ancient documents and to see into the past and to give us revelation for our day. He rebuilt the foundation of the gospel so that we could understand our role here today. The plan of salvation is central to it. You are custodians, you are keepers of the greatest secret, the most precious news anyone has ever had. Can you imagine the apostles after Christ departs, looking off into the world and thinking, we're the only 11 guys who know this? And there were women too, by the way. But we're the only people who know this? I hope we feel like that. I hope we feel like we've got to tell people about how glorious and how amazing this is. Fertility is central to it. What you're doing are wonderful things. Take heart. Take heart. Be the example. Talking and marching are all good things. But when you see a baby in a stroller, you better be down on your knees, goo-goo-goggling that baby and answering the play phone and pinching the cheeks of that baby. Be a good example of it. And to all you young moms out there, God bless you. God bless you. God loves you. He loves what you're doing. He loves what you're doing. And I adore my wife for the sacrifices she's making for my babies. And someday we'll be old, gray-haired and wrinkly and kind of fat. And we'll look at our beautiful children and we'll have more fulfillment than anybody because the restored gospel gives us that. So Joseph is a prophet and the church is true. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jonah. And thanks everyone for joining. I'll hold this open for a minute if you want to connect with anything in the chat. I'll close the recording now.